Hello, my name is Jim Hennager. I'm here on my front porch. It's January. We live next to a small lake. It's frozen over. Usually it has a lot of Canadian geese on it. They've all flown south now. I'm here to share some ideas with you. My background includes a PhD in planning and an MBA in management, an MA in sociology, and undergraduate I have 3 majors in sociology, theology, and philosophy. So you can see I have a lot of education, but I've also been a teacher at the college level since 1969, so I've been around quite a while, and I've had thousands of students who've come from all kinds of backgrounds, and I think I have some ideas that are worth sharing with people that are going through transition. What I'm being told is that you have a situation where some things have changed or they're about to change. And that situation could be, you going from being employed to not employed, from being not employed to being employed. Maybe you've been in good health and now you find yourself in poor health. Maybe you are going through a divorce and you're going from being married to being single. Maybe you're going from being a family member to being a single mom. Maybe you're a soldier who's come out of the war zone or the military, and now you're finding it difficult to get back into a normal society, finding a job and feeling comfortable with your family again. Maybe you've been in prison, and as an inmate you've spent a length of time out of society, and now you're back into society, and you have to figure out, who you are, what it's going to take for you to be comfortable and back into society. So that's a person in transition, and we all are in transition. Life is about that. Everybody goes through changes. Everybody has challenges. Everybody has problems. Everybody has to figure it out. Some more than others. And some have more dramatic kinds of transitions than others. What we're trying to do in this series of courses are dealing with people that are coming into a new situation, re-entering into society, trying to make sense of who they are and how they're going to behave in this new environment. So I assume those kinds of things. I do not assume that I have any magic answers for you. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody's sets of problems are different, and everybody's personality is different. So it's not possible for one person to give magic answers to another person. So I'm not inclined to even suggest that. And my style of teaching is not to try and cram ideas down you or facts or names or history or anything like that and ask you to memorize them. What I think learning is all about is understanding where you're at today and adding something new to it, either some new facts, some new ideas, some new experiences. And when you add that something new to the old you, it produces someone new. So adding something new to the old gray matter upstairs is what learning is all about for me. So that's what this course is about. I'm going to share some ideas with you that are pretty much general in nature so that they could apply to people in many different kinds of situations. And you're going to have to figure out the details of how that works for you, how that gives you some ideas to experiment and try some new things, or how to come to a new understanding of what's going on. Okay, So I hope we have that kind of understood. These courses are meant to be short, maybe up to an hour, and having some work that you hand back into me. So at the end of this video, I'll have 3 kind of assignments for you to work on. You don't need to spend a lot of time worrying about that, and they're not going to take you a long time to complete. But then you send those send them to me, and if I feel like you've been serious about this experience, I'll give you a passing grade. You don't have to agree with anything I say. I mean, this is about you, not me. I'm just going to share some ideas with you and hope that they kind of stick, if that's a good term. And I hope they do. I hope that some of the ideas I share with you get you to thinking about new things and trying some new approaches to life. Now, some people see a professor or a teacher as being a spoon feeder of information. I don't see myself that way. I see myself more as a life coach, a facilitator, someone who's sharing ideas with you and giving you the opportunity to take that where it makes sense to you. Okay, so that's called a role. And being a teacher, being a coach, being a fireman, being a policeman, whatever those jobs are often thought of as roles. So that's one of the concepts that we're going to take a look at, because your role is probably changing. Okay. Another thing that's important for us to understand is who you are, and that's your personality, your identity. And so that's a second concept that we need to deal with. And who you are would be different with every person. Okay, it's a sum total of all the experiences you've had, all of the kinds of events you've encountered, all of the kind of problems you've encountered, all the kind of solutions you've come up with. All of that is you. And it's sort of like if we had a dice and we rolled it every time we made a decision. And when you're approaching something new, like you probably are now, all of those decisions are new, and you may have to think about them. And doing that creates some tension, it creates some anxiety, it may create some depression in some cases, because it's new. It's sort of like rolling the dice, and if you make a turn and go right, certain things will happen. If you go left, something else is going to happen. So you're kind of aware of all of that. After you become comfortable with an environment or where you're at or the people around you, those decisions become more automatic, and you don't really have to think so much about what you're going to do. And what you find is that maybe 98% of everything you're doing is pretty much automatic. You start with the same side of your mouth when you brush your teeth or you shave. You use the same hand to pick up your silverware. And when you greet somebody that it's pretty much the same each time. It can all sometimes even become predictable that what your behavior is. And in some cases we study that. It is very possible that behavior becomes sort of routine, and you get very comfortable with that routine if everything is going okay. It's when you're not comfortable with that routine. It's not something that you can predict is going to happen. That's when we become anxious, and we might even fear what's coming ahead and pull back. And that's the kind of stage that we're probably talking about today, because you're obviously going through some changes in life, and you need to be aware that your person, who you are, is also changing. Okay. The third thing that we're going to look at today is, in sociology we call it norm, which is just the normal kind of things that go on around you. And it's very important that you come to an understanding of what's normal around you so that you fit in. Okay, so let me give you some ideas of how that all works. So you've been rolling the dice, and they've been piling up for 10, 20 years, and the dice look like this kind of a structure for one person and this kind of structure for another person. And not every dice is going to make a big decision, is going to change anything. Once in a while, you'll come across a red dice, that when you roll it, it becomes, very, very important. Certainly, getting yourself into a position where you do something and get into an accident, or you get arrested, or you get some kind of, reply from somebody that you weren't expecting. Those kind of things affect you. And what I'm suggesting is that it's normal to have the dice rolling every day, and that's who you are, okay? But if you've been into a pattern for a long time and the dice are sort of rolling the same way every day, then that becomes the norm, okay? And it isn't until something forces a change on that environment and how you interact with that environment that the norm changes. Now, you develop a series of roles that you act out, and again, after you've been doing these roles for a while, they become automatic. You don't even think about them. For example, if you're a father, being a dad is a role, not a job, but it's kind of a description of who you are in the way people look at that role. You could have a job as a bank teller, that's a role. You could have a job as a policeman, that's a role. You could be a soldier, that's a role, okay? So the role is something that's attached to you from outside yourself, where your personality is something that's basically attached to you from inside yourself, okay? Do you see that difference? And the norm are those kinds of behaviors, those kinds of expectations, those kind of rules or laws that are put on that role and you at the same time. For example, if you worked in a bank and they had a uniform that they wanted you to wear every day, that becomes a norm. Wearing that uniform is expected from you, okay? Then maybe the management of the bank changes, and on Friday they're going to call it Casual Friday, and they allow you to wear jeans. So then the norm changes. You follow? Now you can wear jeans or khaki pants or sweaters on Friday, where you couldn't wear anything but the norm, the uniform before. So norms change. They can change because management changes. They can change because of the weather. They can change because people around you have different things happening in their life. So what's normal one day may not be normal the next day. So you're constantly having to react and interpret what's around you to feel comfortable. When you're in the norm, so to speak, you're probably more comfortable. Everybody is comfortable with what you're doing, and you're comfortable with the environment, and you don't think about things too much. It's just sort of a routine that you go through. And when the role seems comfortable, when the norm seems comfortable, when you seem comfortable with yourself, you don't even think about yourself. It's sort of like having, a stub toe. You never think about that toe until you bang it up against, something, and then it hurts, okay? Then it becomes something you think about every time you take a step, okay? That's the same way with roles and with norms, okay? So a normal person goes through life, adjusting to this changing day to day and the norms and the roles, and that's the problems, that's the challenges of every day, okay? So when you get into a situation where it's changing dramatically, that's when you have to give some thought to how all of this comes about, okay? So let's take the person, who you are. And if you can, kind of think about, how you grew up, what kind of influence your parents and family have had on you, what kind of influence your friends have had on you, what kind of influence maybe your church has had on you, or your community. Maybe you were a football player in high school and the coach had some influence on how you think about life. And all of the kinds of things that influence you are a way of creating an identity from the outside, okay? We call that socialization. And if you thought of yourself like a stick person and put that stick person up here and then draw a circle around that stick person, that would be, the first influences that you have from outside, which would probably be your parents. So you'd have a circle for your mother, a circle for your father, a circle for your brothers and sisters, maybe a circle for your grandparents, your aunt or uncle, whoever was in that circle of influence. And I would like you to give a little thought to who those people were that influenced you and what they were trying to encourage you to be like. That's the influence that happens. Then as you grow older, you start having friends, you start having classmates, you start having teachers, you have ministers, pastors, rabbis that may influence you, and then you have an outside world, like the policeman have some expectations, and a judge would have expectations. So you have these outside expectations, all of them influencing you, trying to develop a normal kind of environment for you that everybody's comfortable with. But at the same time you have these influences coming in on you, you also, as a person, are interpreting them. And in many cases you push back. You are wanting to express yourself in that environment, and that's perfectly normal. As you grow older, you become more and more willing to express yourself. You feel more confident in who you are and what that person is in that environment. And you get into an environment where things aren't fitting. Maybe all of the people that were influencing you are influencing you in this direction, and you want to go in a different direction. That's conflict, okay? That's a part of life. You're not going to ever have a situation where everybody's going to agree with you or support you. You'll find people that dislike you. You may even have some people that dislike you a lot in some cases. So they create a kind of a back and forth tension on that identity that you have. Okay, so that's normal. So what I'm suggesting is spend a little time and think about those people that have influenced you the most. Okay, and what direction were they wanting you to go? Now you might be comfortable with it, you may not be comfortable with it, but what I'd like you to do after you've listened to this video is to think about it and then summarize, who those people were that influenced you the most, and how you feel, how that fits with what you think of yourself. Okay, so you don't have to give me pages and pages of diaries or a long history at all. Just think about it and then write down some conclusions that you have about who's influenced you the most and in what directions those were. Now you may come from a background where you haven't had a lot of people influence you. You may not have had a father figure, you may not have had a mother figure, and that would create other people that were your influencing agents, you might call them, okay? So everybody's going to be different, but I'd like you to think about, who has influenced you, and then how you've reacted to that influence, and where that leads you today. And you should have some ideas that, this is what I want to be thought of, this is how I want other people to think of me, this is how I want to be comfortable with myself, okay? So that's sort of, a few pages would be fine. You can type that out and send it to me. And I don't need details. I just need how you've come to some conclusions, okay, your conclusions. Then think about the roles that you've played, the kind of jobs you've had, the kind of role expectations that you've had as a football player, as a cheerleader, as a worker in a store. Try and figure out all the different kinds of roles that you've been involved with in your life, and see which ones seem the most comfortable to you and which ones have created some conflict for you. Now roles change, and I need you to be aware of that. Sometimes that's not so evident, but let's take changing sex roles. And my master's thesis in sociology dealt with the changing sex roles in both men and women in America, and I analyzed it from 1950s forward. So if we looked at what it meant to be a man in 1950, it's dramatically different than what it's like to be a man in 2016. I want you to appreciate that there's been dramatic change, okay? In 1950s, it was sort of the Leave It to Beaver image. You know, you had a father that went to work, who earned the income, made most of the decisions in the family, was the disciplinary person, was the strong, silent person in the family. And the woman, the wife, was a person who took care of the home, had the children, was more submissive to her husband's wishes, gave the loving kind of attention to the children, and felt that her role there was to be a supportive person. Okay, now in the Second World War, that changed a lot for millions and millions of people. We had the men going off to war. They went through a whole set of challenges and changes, and you know, their environment was upset quite a bit. And when they came back, they were expecting to go back into that traditional role. But in the meantime, millions and millions of women, in many cases, they were forced for economic reasons. They had to earn money, and in some cases, you know, they were needed. They were needed in factories. They were needed to build tanks and aircraft and ammunition for the war effort. So we had a sudden change in sex role identity in the United States. And what happened was, a lot of these women, when they were working and they were getting a paycheck and they were the person who decided how that money was spent, they liked that. Okay, so here you had changes in the environment. You had a man coming back wanting to be a traditional role. You had the woman who has had some new experiences, not just one or two. We're talking about millions of women. They like working. They like to have some independence. They like to have some of that power to make those decisions. Okay, what we saw then is some conflicts. The traditional male had problems with this changing female role. Okay, in the 1950s and early 60s, we had less than 1% of families experienced divorce. But by 1990, we were up to 48%, and by now, 2010, 2016, half of the families that get married and have families are divorcing. And a lot of that has to do with these two people in the relationship not being able to handle the conflicts that have come up because the roles have been changing. Are you following me? Okay. The woman feels that she has the right to go to work, earn money, and still be able to do some of the roles of mother, being a mother and taking care of the children at home. And so in many cases, the woman took on two roles. She took on that exterior role of being a job holder, an income earner, and in many cases those roles outside the family were significant kinds of things for them to do. They became bosses, they become managers, and they were very good at this, okay? So that created the conflict, and I think a large part of the change in marriages with the more divorces that we had dealt with that kind of inability to adjust to the changing roles. And at the same time, the norm kept changing, okay? So in the 50s, it was very common that people grew up in the same county, same neighborhood, same city, and they didn't have a lot of interaction with a lot of people. As jobs changed and people had to travel, that changed also. We started to find people that moved around to different cities for jobs, and we had people that became more successful, had more money, and so they wanted to buy a new house, and so they moved to a new neighborhood with new people, new friends. Okay, so as you started moving around, the norm changed, and what was comfortable in the old neighborhood maybe wasn't as comfortable behavior. Maybe the dress, the kind of shoes that you wore, the kind of shoes that kids wore to school changed. Okay, instead of just any old shoe, you might have become very competitive, so that the kids had to have $60 or $90 pairs of shoes. So things changed, the norm changed, the roles changed, okay? In many cases, the personality, the person, is slower to change because you're going through all of these challenges and looking at the world and interpreting the world different. Many times you have the old person inside a new personality, or somebody acting, like they're a different person, but the old person is still inside there, so to speak, okay? So you had some conflicts there. You had some conflicts in that the norms were changing. For example, in the sexual arena, it became very easy to meet new people. We had different kind of social settings, different kinds of bars and places where people can meet. And so in meeting different people, some of those norms changed. And when we got into the late 90s and 2000 with the internet, that changed again. You could get on to a website and meet all kinds of new people, and they might have completely different expectations, a completely different norm of what they expected from you as a man or from you as a woman, okay? So we had a changing environment in what it meant to be a man, what it meant to be a woman. And what we've seen are a lot of conflicts, okay? We had the sexual revolution where things really opened up and you could experiment with, any number of kind of relationships and different kind of personalities, and some of them weren't very successful, okay? And some people kind of just went into their cave and didn't want to be social at all. So all of these challenges were coming about because the roles were changing, the norms were changing, and people were changing, okay? You had different expectations. You interpreted the environment different, okay? Now, I'm suggesting that it's very important to understand that there's been changes. Everybody has changes, okay? You have to understand and appreciate that the environment is different, and it's probably going to be different every day for a while if you're going through some of these changes. In dealing with that conflict, people deal with it different. Some people think of it as a challenge and it's an exciting time, and look at me, I'm going to go, and don't hold me back. That's one kind of person. Another person might be, this is scary. I don't know exactly what to do. I'm going to just stay in my room, and a lot of people are like that, okay? Other people see this as a challenge, I'm going to do it my way or forget it, And it creates conflict, and that conflict can get them into trouble. Maybe they begin to drink a lot, or they get into drugs, or they get into a gang or a group of people that are doing, things that are illegal. That puts you at risk. And when you're doing that kind of risky behavior, whether it's things that are illegal or things that are sexual experimenting, it creates tension on your life, okay? So all of that tension can create anxiety and stress, and in many people it is depressive. And so you see people going to a doctor, a medical doctor, or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they are saying, I'm not feeling well, I don't know what's happening, I don't have any energy, things aren't going very well for me, can you help me? And typically, the medical psychological fields have come back with, either group therapy, which is sometimes hard for people to get into, or they get into medication. I had a student that came out of the military, only 22, 23 years old. He's married. When he came back, the roles were different. His family viewed him as different. There were things that had happened in the war that he didn't want to think about, couldn't talk about, were very dramatic, and they weighed on him. He thought about them all the time. He had dreams about them at night. But the result was that he didn't feel like he fit anymore. He didn't fit into the family, he didn't fit in with his wife, he didn't fit into his neighborhood, he didn't fit in with his old friends, and he became very depressed. And when he went to get some help at the VA and some counselors, they ended up giving him 19 different prescriptions for medication. Now, the pharmaceutical companies don't like, what I'm going to say, but that's also been a part of what's been changing in our society. In the 50s, people took care of themselves pretty much. They were their own advisors. They were their own, their family was there to coach them on things. But now, we've gotten to a point where the norm is that if you're healthy, both physically or mentally, you're taking some kind of medicine. I think that's crazy, to be honest, because every medicine that you take is going to have some effect on your body, and in many of these medications, they're actually making them more depressed, more anxious, more suicidal. We're having over 20 returning soldiers, commit suicide every day. This is a tragedy. And it's because they're not adjusting to these changing norms and changing environment, changing roles, and they feel depressed. They feel like they've been left out. They don't feel like they're connected to anybody. And that is a tragedy. And drugs, pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs, I don't think are the answer, okay? I'm going to suggest some other things that make more sense to me. You can decide for yourself. But that's a trap to get into taking medications that pretty much mask the symptoms, make you feel better for a little while. And there's a lot of illegal drugs that you can get into, like pot and cocaine and those kinds of drugs that pick you up and get you going, make you feel like things are okay. But it really hasn't changed the environment. It hasn't changed the roles you're dealing with or the norms that you're dealing with. And it's risky behavior. You can get arrested for it, okay? So if you've been in prison and you're coming out, you want to be careful about, getting into those kind of risky behaviors. You want to make some decisions on what's important to you. And this is the second exercise I'd like you to do. I'd like you to come up with a wish list or a goal list, if you want to call it that. Some people would call it a bucket list of things that are important to you. Do you want to be a good father? Do you want to be a good mother? Do you want to have a good job? Do you want to have a nice car? Do you want to have a decent home? Do you want to have, friends around you? Okay? Do you want to stay out of prison? Okay? These are goals that you need to write down. Okay? And if you can come with 10, that's great. I have my students do this all the time. And this one student, this last semester, came up with 10 pages of wish list. She had people that she wanted to have lunch with. She had cities that she wanted to go visit. She had experiences like jumping out of an airplane, parachuting. I'm not going to do that. Everybody has a different wish list. And I think it's important for you to develop a goal list of things that are important to you that you want to accomplish, things that you want to do in your environment, okay? So give that some thought and send that to me when you get to the end of this video. Okay, so that's the second thing. The next thing I want you to give some thought to is how you fit. Okay, so here you got roles, you got norms, you got to understand. If you walk into work in your pajamas, people are going to give you a bad time. Okay, that's not the norm. Okay, so you have to figure out what's normal, what's expected, what's usual, what's lawful, and you have to fit into that. You have to compromise to feel comfortable in that setting. And at first you might not feel very comfortable, but if you're there and you're satisfied that everything is okay in that environment, it becomes more automatic. Okay? So fitting in is understanding what the norms are, understanding what the rules of the role are. Every role has a set of expectations, a role, and that's true of being a father. That's true of being a husband. Okay, there are certain things that your mate is expecting from you, and you have to understand that. If you come into the setting out of a war zone or out of a prison or out of a marriage, and you want everybody to treat you in a certain way without trying to understand where they're coming from, you're going to have conflict. Okay, so it's very important to figure out how things fit. Okay, and it's not easy. the very fact that, you're a person and you have all of these goals and personality issues, history to yourself, that's you. And here's another person who's either going to be your mate or your lover or your friend or your boss. That's a whole nother set of variables, okay? So to get those to fit together is not easy, okay? Don't expect it to be easy. You really have to work at a marriage, you have to work at being a lover, you have to work at being a good person, you have to work at being a good employee, okay? You have to understand all these things and you have to figure out ways to make them fit. And sometimes that's just trial and error. You say something and you get a reaction. You read the manual, employee manual, to figure out what's appropriate or not appropriate. And there are things that are not appropriate. The world has changed. In the 50s, there were some jokes that you could tell at the work site. There were some photographs that you could have in your locker. There were some things that you could, send to people. And nobody would say much about that. But today, things have changed. If you hang up a picture of a sexy woman in your locker, you're likely to have another woman or somebody complain. And if you put it on a computer and send it from one person to another and somebody else sees it, that's no good. You can be arrested for that and you can go to jail again, okay? So you have to understand what the expectations are and how they've changed, and you have to find ways that you can fit in, okay? If you can't fit in, you're going to have problems. And those are the people that end up going back to prison. Those are the people that sign up to go back into a war zone. There are people that have been back to Afghanistan and Iraq 5 times. You have to wonder about that. At its base, that means those people are not comfortable in the at-home environment, okay? You can say whatever you want to about them being a patriot and, defending their country and all of that, but it's obvious that they're not comfortable. And at a point, some people actually try to get into trouble so they can go back to jail. As crazy as that is, it happens. On normal situations, people coming out of prison end up back in prison 60 or 70% of the time. And a lot of that has to do with not figuring out how they fit back into society, not understanding what the roles are and the expectations and what kind of norms are changing. What's normal? What do I have to do to fit in here? Okay? And some people try to make that jump too fast. I don't think you should try to jump from one environment to the other, from one role to another role, too fast. Give yourself a little time. I know that people that have come out of prison have been in there 18 years. They don't even know how to use today's phones or today's computers. They don't have any idea what's been happening in the world. You can't expect to come up to speed, so to speak, in 24 hours or so. Give yourself some time to relax. Give you time to get to know the environment, to understand it, so that you can feel how you fit in. There's no reason why you can't fit in. It's just depending on how you look at that situation and how you interpret how you fit in. Okay? So it's really up to you. It's your responsibility. You can't ask somebody else to be you. Okay? A lot of people try to do that, and it doesn't work. You got to be yourself. You got to figure out who you are and what you want in life, and making up some of these goals is a good way to do that. Okay? So we have an understanding of what the roles are, what the norms are, the expectations. You should have an understanding of who you are and what you want out of life, so to speak. Then you have to move forward in figuring out how to fit and how to put all of these things together so that you can be comfortable with who you are. Okay? Now, that requires a plan sometimes. So that's the third thing I'd like you to do, is develop a plan of how you take that person with those roles and those norms and what's happening in your environment and move towards those goals, move towards those things that you want in life that are important to you, okay? If it's being a father, and you've been away from your kids for a while, it may take a while to get back into a relationship with those kids, okay? Or with your wife, all right? So don't do it, overnight, but try to ease into it and feel comfortable again. When you get comfortable, things will just happen automatically again, okay? So you have to move towards, a new stage in your life, if you want to think about it that way. You're going to roll the dice. Now, a lot of dice get rolled for you, okay? That's luck, or it's, who you know, and who can get you a job, and all those kinds of things are dice rolled for you. You get to decide some of the dice, okay? And it's very important that you roll the dice you control, okay? And that's staying out of trouble, not getting drunk and having an accident, not getting into, situations where there's a lot of conflict, okay? You don't want to get into a life that you're having a lot of highs and lows. And people that are on drugs, that's what's happening. They take the drug to feel high, and then when it collapses on them, they feel low, and you're going up and down. You need to move that into some pattern that's balanced, okay? If you're living a balanced life, some people might think it's boring, but it's really a comfort zone for people, okay? So you want to balance your life out so that, you don't have these kinds of things. You have more stability. That's very important, okay? But you can have a balance. You can have stability. You can have equilibrium, if you wanted to call it that. And you can still grow. What I call it is moving equilibrium, okay? What you do is you add something more to yourself, okay? You challenge yourself. You go back to school. You get a degree. You get training. You volunteer to work at a job till you can learn the trade, okay? You have to add something to the old self to move in a new direction, okay? I think of it like a system, of energy. This is a ball of energy, and if it's in balance, it looks kind of like this, okay? Now, you want to avoid these kind of things, And my students sometimes would walk around the campus and they'd go like this when we were having final exams, hinting that, they were having one of these episodes. But I would recommend you develop an orbit of energy, of daily activity that's fairly predictable, very comfortable to you, okay? And that means avoiding these kinds of experiences. But if you want to go from this orbit to a new orbit, you want to have a new job, you want to have a new car, you want to have a new house, you want to have more respect in the neighborhood, whatever it might be, to go from here to here means you have to put something into it, okay? You have to put time, you have to put money, you have to put expertise, you have to put training, okay? You don't go from here to here without something going in, okay? And a lot of times that can be just energy and your time and your devotion to something, okay? So what you put into that ball of energy that's you is very important, okay? There's a number of things, just like taking this course tells me that you'd like to add something to your ball of personality, ball of who you are, ball of energy, okay? And I recommend that. And so a lot of times when you're moving from this orbit to this orbit, you're going to have some shocks in there, and that's okay. If you never try, never experiment, never fail, it's very difficult to grow, okay? Failure is part of life, and I wouldn't hesitate to try things and fail a few times. Now, if you get into a situation where you keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, but keep getting the same result, you're a dodo. You got to change out of that pattern, okay? We have a lot of people that do that, and I see it in politics, I see it in management styles, I see it in teaching styles. You can bang your head up against the wall just so long, and you're not getting anywhere. Okay, so if you get into that pattern, you have to change out of that and move in some new directions. I encourage people to grow. Put new things in, put a lot of energy in, meet new people, try new jobs, and grow that until you get to a level where you're very comfortable with yourself. And time will go very fast. I can vouch for it, 10 years can go by very quickly as you get into these comfort zones and you're feeling like things are going well for you. That's where you want to be, okay? And you just have to keep reminding yourself of what those goals are. That's sort of called cybernetics. It's coming back and looking at things that are important to you and projecting them out to the future. What am I going to do to go on this vacation? What am I going to have to do to buy this house? What am I going to have to do, to move forward? Okay, so that's cybernetics, and that keeps you, reevaluating your life. That's very important. Okay, you can't just assume that everything's going to be the same for the rest of your life. You have to constantly be reevaluating it and updating yourself. I recommend that you go to a library and become familiar with magazines that interest you and read what you can, or watch videos. You can go to the internet now, and you can just about find any kind of video you want to. So if you're not a reading person, be a video person, like this one is. And that's why I've changed. I used to write courses and hope that students would read it, but I don't find a lot of students that are even willing to read a textbook anymore. So I moved to doing videos, and people are telling me they're really boring, which they might be, I don't know, but you decide that. Okay, if I have some ideas that are getting you to think about things, then I'd like you to go to a third project in this course, where I'd like you to figure out a plan of getting from where you're at to where you want to be. Okay, it could be, I need this and this and this, I need to learn this and this and this, I need to talk to so-and-so and so-and-so, but you develop a plan that you're comfortable with. Okay, that's very important. If you're not comfortable with, your environment, the people around you, and they're not comfortable with you, you find a new environment, you move on. Okay, so I'm hoping you can see that it's up to you. I can't give you magic answers. You got to figure all of this out, and I hope some of the ideas that I've shared today will help you think about things and develop your goals, develop your plan of action, if you want to call it that. Write it down. You need to write down your goals. You need to write down how you're going to get to those goals. If you don't write them down, put them on the refrigerator if you have to. Write them and put them in your wallet if you have to, or your purse. But you have to understand where you're coming from. And you have to understand that the world is changing all the time. Sex roles are changing, laws are changing, how we think about things are changing. Look at the changes that we've seen in the last decade or two about gay people. Okay, so if you had an idea from the 50s of what the traditional male was, that's completely changed in what a lesbian or a gay person might think of today, and we're changing the norm. Okay, you might not be comfortable with that, but it's changing. Okay, and if it's now the new norm, it's very important that you understand that. You don't have to agree with it or participate in that kind of behavior, but at least be accepting of it, that other people are moving to new norms. Okay, so it's a matter of fitting in how you want to be today and in the future. Okay, now there's one other aspect that I would like you to deal with, because what I'm finding with my students, and I'm finding this particularly in the last 5 years, that some of the ways we live, our lifestyles are changing so dramatically that we're not doing things healthy. Okay, so you can have all of these other things that I've talked about going for you, and you figure those out. But if you're not healthy, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to end up having all kinds of problems. And let me give you some examples. I think in the last 2 years, I've had 6 students who've all been hospitalized because they fainted, either at work or at school. Okay, and their parents get very anxious. They run thousands and thousands of dollars of tests on them because they don't want to make, they don't want them to have brain tumors or cancers or these kind of worst case scenarios. But why would a 18, 19-year-old faint at work? Okay, what it comes down to in every case is they're not taking care of their body. Okay, one girl, 18-year-old, was working 2 or 3 jobs. She was a full-time student, and she was trying to get by on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. And she wasn't drinking any water. She was only drinking soda pops, one particularly that's yellow. I'm not going to mention it. And she was eating potato chips and Twinkies. After a while, her body just collapsed on her. Okay, it was lucky that in all the doctors she saw, one doctor asked her if she was drinking water, and the answer was no. And the doctor says, "You're dehydrated. If your brain doesn't have enough water in it, it's not going to function. You're going to faint." Okay, so I need you to come to an understanding not only of who you are as a person, a personality, but you need to come to an understanding of what your body is. Okay, everybody's body is a little bit different. I know you can't tell everybody to get 8 hours of sleep or drink 6 glasses of water, drink these kinds of things. Everybody's got to figure that out for themselves, and I would avoid the extremes. In other words, I know young people aren't getting this kind of information. It's not in their view of what they need to worry about, but there's some basic kinds of things that your body needs. You need 7 or 8 hours of sleep. You need 5 or 6 glasses of good water every day. And that can be tea and coffee, but it needs to be water. It can't be pop or beer or liquor. It needs to be water for your body to function. 70-80% of your cells are water. 70-80% of your brain is water. We're not drinking enough water, okay? That's another one. We're not getting enough sleep. We're not getting enough exercise. Every cell in your body needs some kind of activity to get it to function. You have new things coming into it. You got old things going out of the cell. And it only functions when there's motion, when there's some movement. If you're sitting on a couch or you're sitting at a desk 14, 16 hours a day, you're not moving the cells. You're not getting rid of the waste products in your body, okay? What we're finding are people are dehydrated, and people are not having regular bowel movements. I hate to bring that up, but we have, in American culture, people are only going to the restroom, the toilet, 2 or 3 times a week. You need to be going 2 or 3 times a day, okay? That's a function that your body needs. So you got to drink water. You got to drink all the foods. Now, we have a lot of misconception about food. You think you got to buy organic and expensive food to be healthy. That's not really true. What your body needs is about 56 different chemicals, and the chemicals come from your food. Things like magnesium and zinc and calcium and phosphorus, those are the chemicals that your body needs. Those are the chemicals that your cells need to function. Those cells, those glands, produce a number of other compounds, things like proteins and enzymes. And your brain, for example, makes in these glands over 110 different compounds in your brain, okay? So your body is a biochemical organism. And if you're not putting the right things in, and you're not getting the exercise, you're not getting the sleep, that organism isn't going to function very well. Maybe when you're 18 or 19 you can get by with some, nutty kinds of things for a while, but it catches up with you. And if you're starting to run a fever or you're having, some problems, some pain someplace, get it checked out. Don't wait till it gets serious, okay? So you got that sort of norm there, and I would recommend you write down how you're going to take care of your body. And one of the students I had asked me to have a cup of coffee with her, and she wanted to tell me that her life was a roller coaster going up and down. This is maybe 2 years ago when she took my class. And she got married early and divorced early, and she had 2 or 3 jobs, and they all floated away. She had 2 or 3 boyfriends, and they all went away. And she got to a point where suddenly she was fired from a job, and she had no income. She had to give up her car, give up her apartment, and she had just lost a boyfriend. So she was at the bottom, and she was actually thinking about suicide. When she remembered one of my classes saying, you got to drink more water. So that was simple enough for her. She admitted that she hadn't deliberately drank any water for 10 years. The only time she would have drank any water would have been in a cup of coffee or if she was taking pills. And she took a lot of pills. So she started to drink water. And she didn't like water, but she drank so much water, it started to get her body to functioning normally again. So she decided to try exercising, just walking, and that seemed to help her moods a lot. Then she decided to eat regular meals. A lot of people aren't eating regular meals anymore. That's a disaster. So she started taking some vitamins and eating better, and she was exercising, she was drinking water, she was sleeping better at night, and she found that she was getting by without taking the prescription drugs. So she stopped. And then she gave up pot. She admitted that she smoked pot. She thought she needed it to get through the day, but she found out that she didn't. And that she was feeling healthier all the time to a point where what she said to me was, I got my life back. Okay? And that's what I'm suggesting. It's very easy to get into a routine where you're not taking care of your body. My opinion is avoid putting foreign substances in your body at all costs. They all cause problems, okay? Stay as natural as you can, stay as healthy as you can, and your body will take care of you, okay? That may sound simplistic, but it's being forgotten in our culture. We haven't gone from 1950s with one person in 100,000 getting cancer to today. We have 1 out of 9 women getting breast cancer. We have 1 out of 4 men getting prostate cancer. That isn't happening by accident. That's happening because of what we're doing. It's changing our behavior. It's happening from things in the environment. We're getting chemicals in our body that are causing damage. And we're doing things to our body that are causing damage to our body. Okay, you have to understand that. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself, all right? And you need to take care of, those people around you. Sometimes it takes some real convincing, real educating to get people to change their behaviors in this regard, okay? So, I'm now giving you some ideas how to develop your goals, how to develop a plan of action, how to look at your past and understand what's influencing you. And last, I need you to develop a plan of action about how to take care of your body. Because if you're feeling good about yourself and your body, I'm thinking that you have a very good chance of being successful in what you're doing. Okay? It'll take a while to make those changes, but you can do it. Okay? So, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what you need to give some thought to. You need to send me back four short papers, and you can type them out and send them to me. I'll give you feedback on them, okay? And if some of these things interest you, I urge you to do more research. There's all kinds of self-help kind of literature out there that you can get into, and it's free, okay? There's all kinds of books at the library that you can get into. You can get into a much deeper study if you want to do that, about yourself, about, adapting to change, and you can write me a longer paper. If you'd like to, make this more of an academic experience, it can become, worth a credit, and maybe a 10-page paper with 3 or 4 different references, or maybe an exceptional kind of pass for a 20-page paper, and you really get into some of these issues. It's up to you. I'll give you one CEU, a continuing education credit, for giving me back the feedback that I've asked for. The rest is up to you. You need to be sure that you're registered in the website so that I know who you are and can communicate with you. But I'm here. And if you get to a low point, one of those points where you don't see tomorrow, I hope you'll write to me, I hope you'll call me, or you get in touch with me or somebody. Because it doesn't make sense to give up. Okay? Don't give up. Hope that you can turn things around and move in a direction that's comfortable to you. And give yourself a pat on the back once in a while, okay? Take care. Bye now.